of Zionism, and this is a man who proposed the establishment of a new state of Israel. And in fact, during the declaration of state of Israel, which of course I said was done by David Ben-Gurion, this man was mentioned. He was mentioned as one among the forefathers for establishment of a state of Israel. But but as you can see, my dear students, the creation of state of Israel was celebrated by the Jews, but in fact it caused some problem to the Arabs, who of course rejected the idea of establishing that new state of Israel. My dear students, let's now go to another thing, and this is the factor for the creation of state of Israel. What were the factors which led to the creation of state of Israel? Of course, we have so many factors, but the most important factor, my dear students, is the role of Zionism. The role of Zionism. What is Zionism? Zionism, my dear students, is a national ideology. Zionism is a national ideology which of course unite all people who are Jewish in origin. All people who are Jewish in origin. And this tend to bring together all people whose origin is from, is from that part of Palestine. Wherever they are in the world, they have to come together. In fact, they have to come back to live in what was called Israel. So this is one thing which united all the Jews. And in fact, all the Jews in the world, they regard themselves as Zionists. So for that case, the Jews who were living in different parts of the world, who were living in Europe, who were living in America, they were regarded themselves as one. As I said earlier, Theodore Hens was the first one who came up with that idea of uniting all the Jews, regardless of where they live. My dear students, Zionism is a religious, it's also a political effort that brought thousands of Jews together in what they called homeland, of course, in the Middle East. My dear students, the second factor for the creation of State of Israel is the formation of two terroristic groups. In fact, three terroristic groups. One was called the Irgun, and this was established in 1920, and the other was called the Haganah, and this was established in 1931. And of course, the other one was called Lehi. In fact, these three terroristic groups, they used to fight against the British, demanding for establishment of a new state of Israel. And it was led by different people, shall come to see. But one of them was, people like Moshe Dayan, for instance. There was people like Moshe Dayan. Moshe Dayan. There was also others like Ishaq Shamir. And so many others. These people are responsible for the formation of a new state of Israel. My dear students, after that, as you can see, this is the hotel, and this hotel is located in Jerusalem. And it was attacked by the terroristic group called the Haganah. That was the July 22nd, 1946, where 91 people were killed. And in fact, that group has claimed responsibility. And this is the way they used, at least to demand for their to demand for what they call their homeland. So this is just one example of a hotel which has been attacked. Another factor is the role of the First World War and the Balfour Declaration. First World War has contributed a lot to the formation of that new state of Israel. Why? First, of course, there was what we call Balfour Declaration, in which the foreign minister or secretary of Britain, who was called Arthur Balfour, made an agreement with the leader of the Jewish. He should have to convince the Americans to join the First World War, for the British, and in exchange, the Jews are going to be given their homeland. Of course, is Palestine. So, with that, of course, the agreement was made between the British and the Jewish community, which was led by Theodore Hens. And because of that agreement, then it encouraged a lot of Jews to start to move from different parts of the world to go to settle in what is called today, in what was called the Palestine, and that is exactly what led to the formation of the new state of Israel. My dear students, this is Balfour. This is Balfour, and this is what we call Balfour Declaration. As you can read here, my dear students, the Palestine at that time was under United Kingdom, ruled on the 2nd of November 1917, when Foreign Minister Arthur Balfour wrote to Lord Rothschild, a leader of the British Jewish community, and in fact, they agreed they agreed that Britain is going to give that mandate, colony of Palestine, to the Jews for them to establish their, their new home. So this is Arthur Balfour, and this is what has been agreed. My dear students, another factor for the formation, the creation of State of Israel, it is the Nazi Holocaust before and after Second World War. My dear students, before the Second World War, and even after Second World War, of course, before the Second World War and during the Second World War, something happened in the world, and that was the, that was the Holocaust of the Jews, the extermination of the Jews, where the millions of Jews were killed by the Nazis in the gas chamber. Remember, Hitler just took the Jews from different parts of the world and he put them in what was called a concentration camp. Concentration camp, where there were several camps which has been established in different parts. Some of them were within Germany, others were in Poland, and others were in another territories that Hitler had conquered. And the Jews were brought from different parts of those areas, and they were killed. Most of them, they were European Jews. So, because of this Nazi Holocaust, after the Jews were killed in the gas chamber, then in fact the world felt sorry for the Jews. And this explains why some European countries had supported Jews for establishment of their new land, their new home. And this explains why Jews got a lot of support from such countries. And in fact, they were led by United States of America. My dear students, as you can see, these are the concentration camp. And this concentration camp, just to mention some few, this one is called the Dachau. And this concentration camp, it is one of the places where the prisoners were kept. Prisoners were kept and the people were killed. This is called the Buchenwald. Buchenwald also is another concentration camp. This was located in Germany, and also in this, about 51,000 people were killed. This is another concentration camp. It's called the Bergen-Belsen. Also, a lot of people were killed. A lot of people were killed. In fact, 10,000 people also were killed in this concentration camp, my dear students. Another concentration camp is, Sachsenhausen. This one also is located, this is located in, in Poland. Also, some people were killed in this camp. Their number is 100,000, as you can see. Another one is Chelmno. This one also, a lot of people were killed. 152,000 people also died in Chelmno. Not only this, my dear students, also we have got this one, Sobibor. This is very common, my dear students, because maybe you have watched that film which is called Escape from Sobibor. This is a place, that was real, and this is the place where a lot of people were killed. In fact, 200,000 people were killed. 200,000 Jews were killed in that concentration camp. There was another one which is called Majdanek. Also in this, a lot of people were killed. Their number also is 150,000 people died in this concentration camp. My dear students, we have got some others. This is Belzec. Also, people were killed in this one. But as you can see, the killing was going on almost everywhere, in Germany and outside Germany. And the number of people who died, the Jews, I said, their number was about 100,000 people who died in the gas chamber because of what was done by Hitler in what was called extermination, in what was called the Holocaust, or sometimes, sometimes we can call it a genocide. But this is the largest concentration camp. It's called the Auschwitz. This one is, is the largest, where a lot of people were killed, and this explains how the Jews suffered because of this, because of the Nazi government in Germany. So because of that, then the world felt sorry for the Jews, and they were supporting the Jews in their motive to establish their new land. Another factor for the creation of State of Israel, my dear students, is the role played by United Nations. United Nations formed a special commission on Palestine. A special commission on Palestine was formed. A special commission on Palestine was formed, and in fact it gave some recommendations, and recommendations they gave, it was the establishment of two states in that Palestine land. And that's why we said earlier, it was then approved by United Nations General Assembly on November 29th, 1947 by 33 votes to 13 votes which rejected. And in fact some 10 nations abstained. That means they didn't vote, and all Arab nations, they walked out of the meeting. My dear students, the partition, as we have said, established a Jewish state consisting 56% of Palestine area and Arabs had 43% of the total area. The entire population at that time was 60% Arab, and the Jews were only 40%. Due to its importance to Muslim, Christians, and Jews, as I said, Jerusalem was made an international city. That means it was made a no man's land, administered by the United Nations, my dear students. This is the way UN has divided Palestine to form Israel, as you can see, my dear students. What you see here is what became Palestine, and this became Israel. So they took about 56% of the land, and the Palestine were given 43% of the land, my dear students. And this is just like what I've already said. As I said earlier, the Israelis agreed, but the Arab rejected that division. My dear students, another factor for the creation of the State of Israel is the impact of Second World War. Second World War has contributed a lot to the formation of State of Israel. It contributed to the formation of State of Israel because of some ex-World War soldiers. Some Israelis, they fought that war, that Second World War, and we can mention some few. For instance, there is this man called Moshe Dayan. There is Ishaq Rabin, you know him. There is Ishaq Shamir. There was also Shimon Peres, David Ben-Gurion, Ariel Sharon. Some of them fought the Second World War, and others, of course, did not. But they were fighting. They were fighting against the British while the Second World War was going on, my dear students. As you can see, my dear students, this is the man called Moshe Dayan. Probably you have heard about him, and this man was injured in his eye, when he was trying to attack the British, leading that group which you saw was called the Haganah. You see, this is Moshe Dayan, a picture of Moshe Dayan, who joined the Jewish army Haganah, as we have said, at the age of 14. At the age of 14, you can imagine, my dear students. Another factor for the creation of State of Israel is unconditional support of Israel, of USA to Israel. United States of America had offered unconditional support to a new State of Israel. And why? Of course, even today as we speak, there is a very strong organization in America which is called the AIPAC. AIPAC means America-Israel Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC. And this is a lobbying group that advocates for pro-Israeli policies to Congress and executive branch. And this is so much influencing the American politics. So for that case, ever since, United States has been supporting Israel unconditionally. When I say unconditionally, it means they don't put any condition in support for Israel. And as you can see, my dear students, this is the video. And this video is showing how the American presidents, in one way or another, they vote. They were in fact explaining the way they support Israel unconditionally. This is Billy Clinton. I think you know him. This is Billy Clinton, and he was speaking to he was addressing the members of AIPAC. This is George W. Bush, also addressing the member of AIPAC, why his country, United States of America, is supporting Israel unconditionally. Is supporting unconditionally, my dear students. This is Barack Obama, also you can see, addressing this AIPAC, in different occasions, but all of them, they were telling that they support America, they support Israel conditionally. This is Donald Trump, also is doing the same. So in short, what I'm trying to say, my students, is that United States of America, in fact, agreed to offer the support to Israel unconditionally. And this is what led to the formation of new State of Israel, because as I said earlier, even the first nation to recognize Israel, it was United States of America, and a statement which was made by their president, Harry Truman. My dear students, another factor for the creation of State of Israel is historical or biblical reason. Historical or biblical reason. Why do we say historical or biblical reasons? Historically, the Jews hail from the Palestine. That means their origin is from Palestine. That is their home, and no one can deny this. So, because that is their home, so it means they have the right to go back and establish the, a state in their home. And remember, most of them were taken exile by the Romans. They had been scattered all over the world. And others also believe that Palestine is a promised land. Is a promised land. Some Jews believe that Palestine is the promised land, the land which they are being promised by, by God. So they have the right to go and live in Palestine. So this also is making another very important reason for the creation of State of Israel. My dear students, after looking at the factors for the creation of the State of Israel, let us now move to the impact of 1948 Declaration of Independent State of Israel. What is the impact? What is the impact of the creation of the State of Israel? My dear students, there are so many impacts, social, political, and economic. But these are the impact. The first impact, which is in fact caused a lot of damage to that part of Middle East, it was the outbreak of wars between Arab states and Israel. The Arab states and Israel, they went to war, and in fact they fought different types of war. If you look, if you go back to history book, then you realize that the first war which they fought, it was 1948, and this was between Israel vis-a-vis the Arab state. In fact, 5 Arab states came to join during the war, and here we are talking of Iraq, we are talking of Egypt, but also we have Jordan, we have Lebanon, we have Iraq, we have Egypt, we have Jordan, we have Lebanon, and we have Syria. So there were 5 countries which went to war against Israel in 1948. Not only that, but in 1956, there was another war which broke out, and this, my dear students, is called the Suez Canal War. Suez Canal War. Why is it called Suez Canal? Because this war was fought between Egypt and Israel, but France and Britain, they joined the war pretending that they want to defend the Suez Canal. That's why this war is called the Suez Canal War. The third war, my dear students, was fought in 1967. 1967, and this was the war between Egypt, and this, of course, my dear students, is called the 6 Days War. 6 Days War, because it was fought for 6 days, and this was the between Egypt vis-a-vis Israel. Of course, Egypt went to war with another Arab nations of Syria, Syria, Jordan, and so on and so forth. So in short, this is called the 6 Days War. And in 1973, there was another war which was called the Yom Kippur War. Yom Kippur War. This war is called Yom Kippur because this war was fought during a time when the Jews were celebrating their whole festive of Yom Kippur. And the Egyptians then, they found that it was a good time to attack the Jews because most of the Israeli soldiers were on holiday. So the attack was made on that day of Yom Kippur, and this explains why then we speak of the outbreak of wars between Arab states and Israel. These are just major wars, but there are some other small wars which you cannot explain them here. There are some skirmish wars, which are fought in the border. There was a war which was fought between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. In fact, it's called the Gaza War, and so on and so forth. So, my dear students, this is the first impact of the Declaration of the Independence of a New State of Israel. My dear students, another impact of 1948 Declaration of a New State of Israel, my dear students, it was the withdrawal of the British from Palestine without a proper handover. The British decided to withdraw from Palestine without a proper handover. That means they decided to leave Palestine, without handing over power to the Palestine Authority and to Israel's authority. So they just withdraw, and that left a vacuum. Which was then filled by Israeli soldiers, because at that time, my dear students, Israel was more powerful than the Palestinians. So this also became, one of the impact of the Declaration of State of Israel. Another impact of 1948 Declaration of the Independence of a New State of Israel, it is that the million of Palestinian Arabs were forced to become refugees in the neighboring states of Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and North Africa. A lot of Palestinians, in fact, became refugees. Why did they become refugees? Because their land was taken by Israel. Their land was taken by Israel. And according to the UN report of 1984, over 2 million Palestinian refugees were registered by United Nations Relief and Work Agents for the Palestinian refugees. Those are the people who were registered. But if you count today, there are more than 5 million Palestinians who are living out of their territory. My dear students, as you can see, this is a picture which shows the Palestinian people leaving their homeland after the 1948 Arab-Jewish War. These are the people who are leaving their land. maybe they are going to the neighboring countries, like Jordan, for instance. Others went to Egypt, others went to Syria, and so on and so forth. But this shows that the Palestinian became refugee the moment a new state of Israel was established, because of war which was fought between the Arab nations and the Jewish. My dear students, not only that, but also this picture shows the refugees in the two refugee camps which were in Lebanon, the Sabra and Shatla, and the the Israeli army in 1967 attacked this refugee camp, and in fact there were a lot of people killed and casualties, as you can see. Another impact of 1948 Declaration of Independence of a new state of Israel, my dear students, it was territorial expansion of the Jewish state. A Jewish state was not as it is after 1948. The number of, the size of that Jewish state increased. And this was caused by the policy which you explained earlier, the policy of Zionism, which allows everyone who lives anywhere in the world, to come back to live in Israel, provided he is a Jewish in origin. And this is explained by the Jews in what is called the Aliyah. Aliyah is the immigration of Jews from diaspora to the land of Israel. And for the Jewish, they call it Eretz Israel. That means, this is in Hebrew. So you can see, my dear students, this also has contributed to it's one of the impact of the 1948 Arab-Jewish War. My dear students, just take this example. For instance, we are speaking of Africans, for instance, who live in diaspora. Let's take the example of African people who live in Brazil. That Brazil has got 97 million people who claim to be black. Of course, we can combine the black people and mulattoes. They can be considered as black. And this is according to 2010 census, which, of course, black people consist of 50.7% of the all people. 50.7% of all people who makes the so-called Brazil. So imagine all people who live in Brazil who are black in origin decide to come back to Africa. Maybe they want to come back to Liberia and they claim that our ancestral land is Liberia. What do you think will be the situation of Liberia? Or what, for instance, if the black people who live in America, who are about 30 million, they decide to come maybe to live in that place? It's going to cause a lot of trouble. So to say, my dear students, is Zionism to some extent has contributed a lot to the decrease of Palestinian land, because the more people come, the more land is needed. And the Palestinians therefore have to lose the land which they had during the partition. My dear students, this is the map. And this map, as you can see, it shows the situation before the partition by UN. Of course, in 1947, before the State of Israel was established in 1948. This is before the partition, and you can see what is marked white here is the places where Jews were living. You see? What is marked green? This is the Palestinian land. And the division was made in 1947, as you can see, my dear students. The Arab or Palestinians, they took only, we said, 43% of the land, as you can see. And the Jews took 56% of the land. And this is 1947. But after the 1948 Arab-Jewish War, in fact, the situation changed, as you can see. This is Palestine. As you can see, this is Gaza. This is Palestine. This is Gaza. You see, part of Palestine. And this is Israel. That means the land of Israel has been increased. More than it was during the, during the division in 1947. In 2000 today, as we speak, as you can see, my dear students, the Palestinians' land has been taken even more. They are living in a very small portion of land, and the majority of the land now is in the, in the hands of Israel. And they are still, of course, taking some new areas to establish the new Jewish settlement. So you can see, this is why we say one of the impacts is that the Palestinians, in fact, they lost their territories to Israel. My dear students, this is the video. And this video shows people who were arriving from France. And these people are Jews who were living in France. And they have decided to come to live in, Israel. So, this is showing how people were coming from different parts of the world to come to live in Israel. But ask yourself, my students, will this land not be full of people? Because if people keep on coming, then it's obvious that this land is going to be full of people. These are people who are celebrating their coming to Israel, and they are being received by the, by the Israelis authority. But yet, my students, we have another. These are the people who also were coming to Israel to settle. And these were the Jewish immigrants who were arriving from Ethiopia. And this, of course, is what we call the Falasians, who were living in Ethiopia. Because they have also got the Jewish blood, they are also the Jewish in origin. That means, under Zionism, they have the right to come to settle, in Israel. And this is the Israel Minister of Immigration who was receiving these people. So you can see, people were keep on coming to Israel, and the more they come, the more Israel was thinking of expanding their territories, and that in fact is causing, the Palestinians to lose their land. My dear students, let's now go to another impact of the Declaration of Independence of New State of Israel. Another impact here, my dear students, is that regional political insecurity, and security instability in that region. For instance, in Lebanon, my dear students, there was no peace. In Syria, in Iraq, in Egypt, in Jordan, in Israel itself, there is no peace in that region. There has been only war since then until today as we speak. My dear students, another impact of the creation of State of Israel, my dear students, is the oil crisis of 1970s. There was oil crisis of 1970s, which was caused by the largest oil exporting countries putting some sanctions to Western countries, particularly United States of America. Why? Because United States was supporting Israel, as we have said. So because of that, then it caused the problem in supply of oil in the world. And most of the countries in the world were affected economically, including the Western countries and also third world countries and so on. So this is another impact of Declaration of State of Israel. My dear students, another impact is internationalization of the conflict. The conflict, which was expected to be a conflict of two countries, that means a conflict of Israel and a conflict of, conflict of Israel and a conflict of Arab nations or Palestinians, that conflict has been internationalized. Why? Because of different reasons. First is because of Cold War. There was Cold War at that time, and Soviet Union was supporting the Arab countries, and United States of America, as we have said, was supporting Israel. So it's because of that, then that conflict has to become an international conflict and not a local conflict. Not only that, but also there is this issue of religious significance. That part of Israel, that part of Palestine, particularly Jerusalem, it has got significance to all major three religions of the world. It's very important to all major three religions of the world. To the Muslims, to the Christians, to the Jews, Jerusalem is very important. And this explains probably why, the United Nations in 1947, when they were dividing Palestine to form Israel, they declared that Jerusalem as a no man's land because of its importance. My dear students, as you can see, this is Jerusalem. This is Jerusalem. And this is the city that we are talking about. And this probably is one of the reasons why that conflict has been internationalized. And in this Jerusalem, there is this mosque. This is called a Dome of Rock. The places where Muslims come to worship all over the world. In fact, it's considered to be one of the holiest places for the Muslims after Mecca and Medina. And just aside this mosque, this Dome of Rock mosque, there is another mosque which is called Al-Aqsa, which is also considered a very holy place for the Muslims. But not only that, this is the places where Jews come to worship. The Western Wall, or Wailing Wall, is the most religious site in the world for the Jewish people. It is located in the old city of Jerusalem, and the Jews come to worship in this, in this Wailing Wall, in this Western Wall. And in fact, it was part of the Jewish whole temple, which is called the Temple Mount. This is also another thing. But not only that, as you can see, this is the church, and this church is called the whole, the whole sepulchral church. It is located in Jerusalem, and in this church is identified as a place of both, a place where Jesus Christ was crucified, and also the tomb of Jesus Christ of Nazareth is found in this area. So this is making Jerusalem to become a whole city for three major religions, for the Muslims, for the Christians, and for the Jews. And this also probably is the reason why this conflict has been internationalized. My dear students, let's break for a while. We'll be back after some minutes.
You are watching Darasa Online.
Welcome back, my dear students. At the beginning of our lesson of today, remember, I gave you some questions. And it's my hope that at this time you can be able to attempt those questions after the lesson that we have gone through so far. My dear students, the first question, as you can read it here, why was it necessary to create the state of Israel? Why was it necessary to create a state of Israel? My dear students, here we have the answers, as you can see. The first answer, why was it necessary to create the state of Israel? What were the factors for the creation of state of Israel? The first, of course, as we've discussed already, is the role of First World War and the Balfour Declaration. The role of First World War and Balfour Declaration. Remember, we discussed about First World War and the Balfour Declaration. These two things, remember, are linked because Balfour Declaration was made in 1917, as we have said, between the foreign minister of Britain, called Arthur Balfour, with the leader of the Jewish community in Britain, who was called Rothschild. And so they met and agreed upon several things. And among things they agreed, it is that Britain is going to give Palestine. Remember, at that time, Palestine was under the mandate of the British after it was taken, from the Turk. So it was under the mandate of the British, and they agreed that they are going to give Palestine for the Jews to establish their new home. And this became a reason why then it was necessary to create State of Israel. It became a factor for the creation of State of Israel, because since then many Jews started to think of going there and settle. Even the settlement of the Jews started before the establishment of that state officially as per Declaration of United Nations after voting in the UN 1947. So that is the first point. The second point is the Holocaust of the Jews. Remember, we said it earlier. A lot of Jews were killed in the gas chamber. A lot of Jews, my dear students, were killed in the gas chamber. And those Jews who were killed in the gas chamber, in fact, they provided some moral, they fostered some moral support of people all over the world to support Jews to their cause, because they feared that if they don't, then probably what has happened during the Nazi Holocaust can occur again. So they unconditionally supported Jews in their motive to establish their new homes. So the Holocaust is one of the reasons which inspired people, particularly countries like United States of America, to support the creation of a Jewish state. Remember, we said 6 million Jews were killed, people were kept in concentration camp, others were starved to death, and so on and so forth. So this became one of the reasons for establishment of State of Israel. And the third is historical reasons. Historical reasons, of course, we have said, you have to go back and consult history. Why do we say you have to look back to history? Because one can ask you a question. What is the home of Jews? What's the original home of Jews? It's like the black people today, if they want to come back to Africa, you cannot deny them because it's their origin. I mean, this is the place where their forefathers used to live. So it's the same to the Jews that their forefathers used to live in that place of Palestine. So they've got some reasons to go back and live in that area. They have the reasons to demand for establishment of their nation. But also you can go to biblical reasons, also it goes to historical, that the Jews, they believe that they believe on the issue of promised land, and they believe that the promised land is what is called Palestine. So they believe that the creation of State of Israel was part and parcel of fulfilling the God's promise of giving them their home. Another thing is the impact of Second World War. Of course, we have said how Second World War has made the Jews strong. They fought Second World War. They suffered during the Second World War. So it means they had nothing to lose thereafter. That's why they have to strive. They have to struggle. They have to fight for the creation of their nation because of the suffering which they faced. But most important also, we said, because of Second World War, then a lot of Jews either participated in the war direct or they were fighting another wars besides Second World War, like what what we spoke about Moshe Dayan, who was fighting against the British while Second World War was going on. So those people already, they were strong. They had determination for establishment of their new home. Another point is the role of United Nations organization. United Nations has played a very major role, especially when they agreed, the issue of establishment of a Jewish state to be tabled, to be brought in the discussions, and later to allow the voting to take place, whereby majority of the people agreed and some other, of course, rejected, others walked out, and so on. But all in all, a new state of Israel was established because of the role played by United Nations organization. My dear students, another point is the role of the Jewish terroristic groups. The Jews had established the terroristic group, like we mentioned, Irgun and Haganah. Especially these two, they were attacking the British. We saw, for instance, in our lesson, how had they attacked the King David Hotel in Jerusalem, where 91 people were killed. So that was a way of forcing the British to move out of Palestine, and so they can come and establish their new home. Another point here, my dear students, is the role of Zionism. Zionism, as we have said, this is an ideology which insists that everybody, anyone who is Jewish in origin, have the right to come and settle in Israel. And so many people were coming back to live. And this has started, my dear students, even before the First World War. Even before the First World War, some people had planned to come to live in Palestine, and the large number came after First World War. But after Second World War is when the world has witnessed the large number of Jews migrating from Europe to come to settle in Palestine. And I can tell you, my dear students, if today you try to count the number of prime ministers who have led Israel, the only one who was born there in Palestine, her ancestors were born in Palestine, it was Ehud Barak. But all others, they were foreign immigrants. There were people who came from foreign countries to come to settle in what is called the Palestine. My dear students, let's now come to the second question. Analyze the reasons for the defeat of Arab nations in the Arab-Jewish War of 1948. Why Arabs were defeated in that war? Of course, there are so many reasons to explain why Arabs were defeated in that war. But the first reason is that the Arab troops were poorly trained and ill-equipped. They were very poorly trained. Remember, at that time you could not compare the Israelis' army and the Arabs. Why? Because the Israelis already, they have a lot of experience. But in terms of weapons, as you can see, my dear students, the Arab army was very ill-equipped. They didn't have equipment compared to the Israelis' army. Israel was getting support from the United States. In fact, during 1948 war, they obtained a lot of weapons from Czechoslovakia, apart from those which were coming from the United States. So it was obvious that the Arab nations at that time could not stand and fight against against Israel. Another point is Israel fought desperately to win the war. They fought desperately to win the war, especially because of what happened before and during the Second World War. Remember, they were killed by Hitlers. Remember, they have suffered a lot. So it's like one can say they were fighting that war as if they have nothing to lose. They were fighting that war as if they have nothing to lose. Because of what happened, there was nothing to lose for them. So it was just like a matter of living and dying. So that explains why the Arabs were defeated. The third point is the Arab states were divided among themselves. The Arab states were divided among themselves. They went to war, but some other nations like Jordan under King Abdullah, they had their missions. They went to war, but King Abdullah betrayed the others, and he made an agreement with Israel so that Jordan can acquire West Bank. So you can see, while other countries are going to war to defend Palestine, King Abdullah of Jordan, he made an agreement with Israel to acquire West Bank if he does not join the war. So you can see the Arab nations were divided. Another point here is the role of Israel terroristic group. While war was going on, the terroristic group of Israel was also going on to attack, some Arab villages and so on. And you can see that the terroristic group called the Haganah attacked the Arab village and killed a lot of villagers. And those people, they have no other option but to evacuate, to move out of that village, at least to try to save their life. Another point is Israel support from United States. Israel support from United States of America. United States has supported Israel unconditionally, and they were getting whatever they need. Whatever US can afford to give, it was given to Israel. So because of that support, then it made it made Israel to become so strong. They are getting weapons, they are getting training, and so on and so forth. Another point, my dear students, is that the Second World War gave Israel more experience. It gave more experience to Israel because they were fighting that Jewish-Arab war with a lot of experience. Most of them had participated in the war. Remember, I spoke about people like Moshe Dayan, Yitzhak Rabin, Shimon Peres, David Ben-Gurion, and so many others who were the soldiers who fought the wars, either Second World War or fighting other wars while Second World War was going on. So those people had a very, very high experience. So my dear students, this is what we can say regarding the second question, analyze the reasons for the defeat of the Arab nations in the Arab-Jewish war. Let's now move to our last question, show how the independent state of Israel affected the world. How the world was affected by the declaration of that independent state of Israel. The first effect that the world has experienced, it is the growing of Cold War. Remember, I don't say the emergence of Cold War because I don't think that the creation of State of Israel has contributed to the emergence of Cold War. The emergence of Cold War, my dear students, we have discussed it already, and you know the reasons for the emergence of that Cold War. Here we are talking, my dear students, about the growing of Cold War. The Cold War grew. Why? How? We said it earlier, that Israel was supported by United States of America unconditionally. And why? Because Israel was the United States-based allies in the Middle East. There are some reasons, but one of the reasons they gave, they said that Israel at that time was the only democratic country in that region. But of course there are some other reasons, like what you have mentioned about the role of AIPAC, the role of AIPAC. But also USSR, on the other hand, was supporting the Arab nations. So that has caused the growing of Cold War in that area. That is the first impact. That's the first way in which the world was affected. The second way was the emergence of political instability in the Middle East. There was political instability in the Middle East. Today, as we speak, my dear students, there is war everywhere in the Middle East. There is war in Lebanon. Lebanon, for instance, ever since 1948, Lebanon has never known peace. Lebanon sometimes is ruled by the militias. You can go to the one part of Lebanon, for instance, there is one group called Hezbollah. But if you go to other part of Lebanon, there are some Christian militias who are supported by Israel. The government of Lebanon is very much unstable. And this is exactly, my dear students, what we can see in that region. But if you go to Syria today, it's the same. If you go to Gaza, it's the same, and so on and so forth. So in short, one of the effect of the declaration of independence of Israel to the world was the emergence of political instability in the Middle East. Another point is the rise of terroristic group and movements. The rise of terroristic group and movement. A lot of terroristic groups were born in those areas, even though some will say no, they are not terroristic groups. In fact, they are liberation movements. For instance, among the Palestinians, we have got what is called the Hamas. There is Hamas. There are some other groups which was the military wing of PLO, Palestine Liberation Organization, and that is called the Al-Fatah. That is also another group which is fighting for the right of the Palestinians. To the Israelis and the Western countries, they call them terroristic group. But in fact, if you refer to the Arabs, some of the Arabs and the Palestinians themselves, they are calling themselves the liberation movements. But also we have got some other terroristic groups spreading all over the world, because their origin, as you can trace it, is from the Middle East. So they have been inspired by what was going on. Another thing is increasing of religious tension and internationalization of the conflict. Of course, I've said about this already. There is religious tension in the areas because of the importance of that area of Jerusalem for Muslims, Christians, and Jews. Another point is the problem of refugees, which affect the neighboring countries. Problem of refugees does not only affect people who are refugees themselves, but it also goes and affect people who live in the neighboring countries. For instance, people who live in Lebanon, they have never known peace because a lot of refugees from Palestine, they are arriving in their home. In Jordan, for instance, also in Egypt, particularly people who live in the border areas, in Rafah, that a lot of Palestinian refugees are crossing they are crossing the Rafah cross to go to Egypt. The same apply to Syria, same apply to Jordan, same apply to Iraq. Even some part of North Africa, they have also received a lot of refugees from Palestine and so on. This is another problem. Another thing is loss of life and properties. Loss of life and properties. Life of people have been lost. The properties have been destroyed. So this also become one of the effect of the Declaration of New Independence of Israel. And the last point, my dear students, is the displacement of the Palestinian people due to shrinking of their territory. The Palestinian territory is decreasing, and as the day moves, a lot of Jews are coming, and and Israel always want to establish the so-called the new settlement for the Jews. And the more settlement they established, the more Palestinian people are becoming landless. And this has contributed much to Palestinian, then as I've said, Palestinian territory is decreasing. As you can count today, Israel is holding up that land for more than 78%. That means the Palestinians are left with the very small areas of West Bank and Gaza. West Bank and Gaza, and all other areas are in the hands of Israel. At this note, my dear students, let's come to the end of our lesson of today. I'm pretty sure that you have enjoyed the lesson, you have followed the question, and you can be able to attempt any questions, if at all questions come from this topic. Our next lesson, my dear students, is to finish up this topic of, threat to world peace, and we are going to look at the other part which is left in this subtopic of creation of State of Israel. Our focus, my dear students, will be the effect of the wars which were fought. Of course, we are going to discuss them in detail. The wars which were fought, and also the peace talk, which is called the Camp David Accord. This is what we are going to look, my dear students, next time. So until then, my dear students, thank you very much. Goodbye and have a good time.
Nchi yetu imebarikiwa. Hivi ni vya kwetu tu, havipo hali pengine. Hakika vinavutia.